Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with the knife video. Got a comparison for you today, and this is, I think, is going to be an interesting one. I'll be honest, it's really a tough call, even for me, in terms of which one of these I like better, which one I would recommend more. First up we have, or I guess not first up, but we just happen to have the Recon 1, all right, obviously from Cold Steel, and then we have the Spyderco Manix 2 XL. Now let me share with you my biases on this. Both of these are knives that I've had in my collection for a long time. Now you guys know I sold my AUS 8 Recon 1 so that I could finance the updated version. The Manix 2 has been in my collection for a really long time. Not even sure how long. Definitely a number of years, both of these. Now, let me say that maybe you could have said before, and I didn't do this before for this reason, they weren't that comparable because they weren't that close in price, they weren't that close in materials. Now though, with the CTS XHP steel on the Recon 1 and the higher price point that brings, I would say they're more comparable. Now there's still a bit of a price discrepancy, okay? So this is, I think, around $100, 95 bucks or so, and the Manix 2 is, now if you get the satin blade version, I think you're around 120, maybe a little less than that. If you get the black DLC, you're going to be a bit more, maybe 140. Okay, so now by the way, let me add that when I got mine, I will say when I did research on pricing for this video, I was a little shocked. When I got my Manix, it was like 115 for the black and like 100 or 105 for the satin. So those prices have come up since that time. Anyway, that's besides the point. What they are now is around 120 for the satin, 140 for the black, and around 100 bucks for the Recon 1. It only comes in black. Does come in a number of different blade shapes, and I'll mention that when we get to that part of our discussion. Okay, so those are the two blades, and I think these are, as I said, comparable in many, many ways. They're comparable in size and weight, they're comparable in price point, they're comparable in roll. I think both of these are good as EDC blades, but they are both large enough that they can, and hard use enough that they can be pretty flexible for, you know, taking out to the bush or taking into, you know, some kind of a combat role, defensive role, firearm backup, police, something like that. And so there's a wide range of uses on both of these. All right, probably, you know, both of them are sort of marketed a bit as tactical blades, even though I'm not crazy about that term. They do fall into that category. And of course, both of them are marketed as being hard use. A lot of people have said that, you know, the Manix was sort of Spyderco's answer to the sort of hard use, heavy duty trend. I'm not sure if I totally get that. It is probably a little more robust, a little heavier duty than some other Spydercos. So that's how we get things started off. I think these are very comparable blades. I think they'd be very close competitors. Obviously, in terms of aesthetics, that's really not something we can compare. You may just like the look of one or the other, and that's a different discussion. But for the things that we can compare, let's go ahead and work through that and try to see if we can't figure out which one would be most recommended or which one would be at least my favorite, right? There'll be some things here that you may feel differently than me about. That's okay. At least I'll try to tell you about those as we go through. So, size and weight. Well, the Recon 1 is 9 1/4 inches, weighs 5 ounces, has a 3 3/8 inch blade. A lot of places label it at 4 inches. I've never seen a Recon 1 that was 4 inches. They're almost always 3 3/8. Everyone I've ever seen has been 3 3/8, and the handle is 5 3/8. Okay, so by the way, the handle on this in terms of thickness is about 1/2 inch thick. In fact, it's a good full 1/2 inch thick. So there you go. That's the size and weight on the Recon 1. On the Manix 2, very similar, okay? 8 15/16, so almost 9 inches. You still have 3 7/8 inches of blade. 5 1/16 for the handle. 5.2 ounces, so it is 0.2 ounces heavier, and you can see that it's full stainless steel liners, which explains that to a great extent, I think. And it is a little thinner than the Recon 1 at about 7/16. So that's not a lot, but it is a little thinner. In terms of width, they're both fairly thick blades. The Manix 2 is a little thicker. So how these carry, both are going to take up quite a bit of space in your pocket, and really that 0.2 ounces is hardly going to be noticeable. Okay, so I would say in terms of size and weight and how they're going to carry for what you're getting, I think both of these are pretty good. And I really can't try to claim that one is way better than the other. You know, the 0.2 ounces is not, to me, substantial enough to say the Recon 1 really wins out on weight. And especially because, you know, you have the same cutting edge, although the overall length is larger on the Recon 1. So that sort of balances things. So I'm going to say in terms of size and weight and how that makes them for carry, I'm going to call it a tie on these two. Now, what about the blade? Well, on the Recon 1, I happen to have the clip point blade, but there's also a spear point and a Tanto. The steel is CTSX-HP, which is very good performing steel. Clip point, again, is the one I have. It is hollow ground. Now, here's a bias of mine, okay? I like hollow ground better than flat ground. I just find for most EDC tasks, and even for other things, for harder use stuff, I still find a hollow ground blade more effective than a flat ground blade. You may feel totally different than me, and that's completely up to you. But for me, and by the way, all of the versions of the Recon 1 are hollow ground. Okay, you got, by the way, 3 5/8 inches of cutting edge, and this Recon 1 does what most cold steels do and fail to sharpen all the way to the edge, which is a little bit annoying. All right, now the Manix is the, drop point or leaf shaped blade that we're comfortable with from Spyderco. It is a full flat grind. It's S30V steel. Now, the difference between S30V and CTSX-HP is there is a difference, okay, but it's going to be very difficult for most people to notice. Okay, both of these are very good blade steels. Both of these are going to perform exceptionally well, especially if you're used to some of the cheaper steels, some of the more budget-friendly steels. Both of these are very, very good performers in terms of edge retention and corrosion resistance, which is primarily what we care about. Now, in terms of toughness, there is a little more material out near the end on the Recon 1. The Manix 2 gets really thin out here, which could cause concerns for some people about breaking that tip off, and I know that's a common issue with Spydercos that people talk about. In terms of actual, performance, usefulness, these are going to be very, very similar. Now, for me, again, I'm going to give it to the Recon 1 on blade because of the hollow grind. And I really prefer a hollow grind over a flat grind. Although, let me say, I've used this Manix a ton and it performs really, really well. So I'm not in any way disparaging the Manix 2's cutting performance. Just saying that my preference, my bias is for hollow grinds, and the cold steel knives with these hollow grinds, they are really nice and thin behind the edge, and that makes them slice exceptionally well. All right, so that is the blade. I'm going to give that one to the Recon 1. Now, how about lockup and deployment? Well, Recon 1's got the triad lock, so it's going to be exceptionally, stupidly strong. The Manix 2 has this ball bearing lock, which is sort of Spyderco's version of the Benchmade Axis lock, although I will say this. I think Spyderco's version is stronger, although not as easy to actuate. Okay, it is a little more difficult. But let me say this about these two in comparison. Both locks can be a little miserable. If I try to actuate this with one hand, I can do it, but it's tough. This Recon 1's not bad, but I know some cold steels, that triad lock is really, really stiff and hard to actuate. All right, so both of these locks can be a little tough to actuate. Both of them are going to be pretty strong. There's no question really, though, that the triad lock is stronger. Now, that's not the only thing that matters. And in these two blades, as they compare, the Manix is faster and a little more fun because of the fact that I can spider flick it or I can, thumb flick it, where the Recon 1, with a little bit of wrist action, I can flick it out, but it's not as smooth, it's not as fast. All right, so that's lockup and deployment and how they compare. And the triad lock typically has some of those issues. Now, I've got a few. My current Code 4 is amazingly fast and smooth. So the Triad lock can be that way, but I've noticed some variation. Even in Recon 1s, you may get one that's really, really stiff, and then you get another one that's a little more comfortable. And that's just part of the deal with the Triad lock, okay? So which one do I really call the winner on this? Tough call. Again, for just strength alone, you definitely have to go with the Triad lock. For ease of deployment and fun, and you know how well it flips and stuff like that, or how well it flips open and stuff, you got to give it to the Manix. So depends on which of those. I'm going to kind of call it a tie, but depends on which of those you favor. All right, let's move on now to the handle. This is one again where they're quite different, but both very good. So Recon 1. Full G10 handle. I really like that. It does cut down on the weight, and it does make the knife very efficient. Okay, so only G10 handle scales here. There's no stainless steel liners involved at all. It is very comfortable and extremely grippy. You know, Cold Steel has that brick pattern G10 that's ridiculous in terms of how grippy it is. And yeah, I'm not disappointed with this at all. It's extremely comfortable. Now, when it comes to the Manix is one of those knives where the handle shape really molds to your hand. This thing just locks you in. So, which one is actually better? Here's how I'm going to call this, okay? This one locks you in more. The jimping is stiffer. The fine grip pattern on the G10 is really grippy. And with that extra hook at the back and the proud liners, this is a knife there. When you grab it, it grabs you back. Okay? Now, the Cold Steel, it's comfortable. It's extremely grippy. I think more than grippy enough to be used in any application you could think of, including sort of combat roles where you're really worried about retention. But it's not quite as positive in its grip as the Manix is. Okay. Further, now let me kind of trade off a little bit. The Recon 1 is a little more comfortable. So let's say you're doing something, you know, bushcraft tasks, or you know, you're cutting all the food up for supper, or you're processing wood. Don't baton with this, but you could, you know, do feather sticks, and you can even gently split kindling and stuff. If you're able to just push it through, which a lot of times when you get to the small size kindling, you are able to do. So if you're doing things where you're really going to bear down on your knife, this one's a little more comfortable. This one's a little more grippy. Part of that is because of this, you know, this sort of hook on the bottom that really grabs onto you. The other advantage that I think the Manix has is, you know, what some people call Spydernomics. I love that choil. I'm biased toward knives with a choil. I really like that option to choke up. One of the things that I really look for in a knife is versatility, okay? Now, both of these are extremely versatile, but that's why I'm biased toward a choil. I like the fact that I can choke up on this and do finer work, and now it does everything a really small knife can do. I back off, and I've got everything that a large knife can do. Now, I will say this. The Recon 1 has the ability to let you choke up there, but it's not nearly as comfortable, and the handle's not designed for it the way the Manix is designed for it. So, in terms of the handle, the ergonomics, and the grip of it, overall, I've got to give it to the Manix. Now, a couple other things to compare that to me are not a big deal, but maybe they will be to you. The Manix does not carry very deeply, so I have this Casey Lynch clip on mine. So in terms of how deep they carry in pocket, the Recon 1 is deeper. The lanyard hole on the Recon 1, you know, maybe you could fit bank line through it, but you're definitely not going to fit 550 cord. This side is an oversized lanyard hole specifically to allow for that. They both have reversible pocket clips. So, overall, what would I say about these two knives? If I had to get rid of one, or you know, if someone said, look, I can only afford to buy one ever. I'm not going to be able to save up and buy the other one or anything like that. Which one would you recommend? Because they're so close, okay, but the Recon 1 comes in about $20 or more less. I would say as a recommended knife, when someone else asks me where to spend their money, I'm probably going to direct them toward the Recon 1. If someone is a huge Spyderco fan, yeah, obviously you go with the Manix, but really both of these are totally outstanding blades. I think both of these are absolute wins for their respective companies, and both of these are favorites in my collection, and they aren't going anywhere. They've been in my collection as long as or longer than possibly anything else that I have, and they are definitely on my list of favorites. To declare a decisive winner here, you saw the comparison. They're extremely close and extremely comparable. So really, I think that's a call you're going to have to make on your own, other than to say, you know, price point on the Recon one is a little better. Now, keep in mind that this is made in Taiwan, which is not a bad thing, right? Taiwan is not the same as certain countries that people feel strongly about buying or not buying from. While the Manix is made in Golden, Colorado in the US. That's another consideration for some people that you may want to add into your whole consideration. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was actually a lot of fun to do. It's really fun kind of thinking through the features of these two knives and sharing them with you. We'll talk to you later.